So here we are again. It's been ages since I've done a YouTube video, and which seems weird for me because I video every week, and Thursdays and Fridays I'm either sat here in the studio talking to a camera or sat in front of my computer editing videos. And when I'm on the bank I video, so I've done an awful lot of videoing over the last, well, couple of years really, and loads since I was last on YouTube with a video. But most of those have been for my Inner Circle channel, my Patreon channel, which if you're interested in that, there's a link at the bottom. There's a thing called Linktree probably in the comments at the bottom, which is like a directory of loads of stuff you can just click on, but there'll be a link there to the Inner Circle, which has got, oh God knows, it must have 45 hours of videos of me going through the books and all the historic stuff and various other bits and pieces. And that comes out every Friday at 2 o'clock, and that's about, I think it's £6 a month at the moment, which is £5 plus VAT. So I've done lots of video, but when I've looked back, I've had a few comments on YouTube and stuff saying, you know, when are you going to do another one? And I look back, and the last video I done on YouTube, unbelievably, was mid-September. And I think the last fish I showed you was this one, which was an amazing creature. And I caught that from K1, which is where I targeted for the autumn. And I did a lot of fishing on K1 at the smaller end of the lake, the less popular end of the lake, and I loved it up there because it was less angling pressure, you know, quieter and nice. It's odd though, it's a strange area up there. The fish are either there or they're not, which sounds quite obvious, but there'll be a lot of fish will move up there and you get a result. If you do at one or two, or there's too much spotting or markering or whatever, waff they go. The default area is the other end of the lake, the bigger bowl end of the lake, and the weedier areas are also up that end. You've got two bays in the corner up there, on each corner, both which have quite a lot of weed in, whereas the smaller end is quite barren out there. There's bits and pieces, but there's not an awful lot. There's gravel bars and gravel humps, and there's silt and what have you. But the weed is definitely up this other end. Plus it's got the larger bowl section of the lake, and they love it out there in the middle, like they do on all lakes. You know, fish get pressured, boff, they go to the middle. And there's one particular weed bed on K1 this year, which is sort of ended up being isolated. There was quite a lot of weed about, and it all broke up and disappeared. And it left this one small weed bed, and it is a small weed bed, or was a small weed bed. Probably only a few rod lengths long and a rod length wide. It's just this little island of weed, and it was right close in front of a swim called the Bream, which is not a particularly popular swim. But the fish just loved it there, absolutely loved it there. Unfortunately, this weed bed could get fished by a swim further round to the right called Trudy's Mate and a swim to the left called Helipad. And they can both legally, if you like, I'll explain that in a minute, fish out to the back of this weed bed, even though it's very close in front of this swim, the Bream. Now, because K1's a busy lake, and this is happening on a lot of lakes now, we get a lot of anglers, to stop any confusion or arguments or whatever, there is a map which all members get showing how far you can, your limits of that swim, where and how far you can cast from each swim. And I know, you know, it's not the sort of thing I generally come across, and I don't really like it that much, but it serves a purpose, and I can see that it serves a purpose on smaller lakes with lots of anglers. It gets rid of all the arguments of who can fish where. So that's what I mean by legally. So within their limits, these other two swims could also fish to this weed bed. So it was getting quite a lot of attention, as you can imagine, from three angles, this one little patch of weed. But it was doing a lot of fish. The fish absolutely loved it. Not all the fish are there, there's a lot of fish in K1. But it was a very, very productive area, and it's very hard to get, especially in the two swims, the one to the left and the one to the right, very hard to get into them. They were permanently occupied, and it was doing regular captures of big fish. I think I'd done one trip into the helipad. I've managed to get a night in there and had a couple of small ones at some stage, but you could see, you know, early morning or in the night, you'd see fish, and quite often they'd be in this area. But more so, definitely, even if they weren't around this one weed bed, they'd be up that end of the lake. But when they made these excursions to the other end, if you were there and you timed it right, I'd had some good results there. You know, I'd had a 43 pounder. I'd had that one I just showed you, which was, I think that was just under 38, wasn't it, something like that. And a couple of other nice fish there, and been on my own. And that was the important thing about that end. I mean, I'd even been set up there one day and two or three other anglers turned up for overnighters and went two opposite me and one down to my left. And just before dark, I knew I wasn't going to catch because of the extra pressure. I packed everything up and moved. It's one of them areas. If you can get in there at the right time, in the right conditions, on your own, you can have a touch. But even then, I've always found it's worth then moving. If you catch on your first night, or you catch and you've still got a night left, rather than stay on the same spots and hope for it to repeat itself, generally the act of catching them has scared them off. So it's a nice area, but you've got to play it right. Now at that time of year, following on from that last capture that I showed you, last time I did one of these vids, we were headed up towards the equinox and the full moon, which is my favourite time of year. You know, I've written it, spoken it, said it so many times across all platforms. That is the time for me, that September harvest moon and the equinox. And this year they came within a couple of days of each other, and unbelievably, I think it was something like a Monday and a Wednesday, and I fished Monday to Wednesday, so it was almost like it was meant to be. So I'd put a lot of store in that full moon and that particular week. And I don't know whether it was because I kept going on about it on various things, Facebook and Instagram, you know, well, next week's the week and what have you. But I turned up, it'd been very quiet, K1, angler-wise. So quiet, it'd been, compared to normal, it had been quite nice up there and quiet for anglers. Full moon week, it was rammed. I turned up, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get anywhere near the fish. I had 3 nights I'd booked instead of 2. I'd got 3 nights for that particular week. And I just blew it, really. I fished 3 or 4 different swims. I knew where I wanted to be. I couldn't get where I wanted to be. On the second night, which was actually the night of the full moon, I did manage to get in close to where I wanted to be. There's a bay in the car park which leads round to this one of these swims, which is called the helipad, that fishes out to this weed. But this bay is quite weedy, and the fish can get in there in numbers. And the night I got in there, there was obviously fish in there. I'd seen fish showing, I'd seen fizzing, I'd seen the weed knocking. It looked like a good opportunity for a carp. And like I say, this was the night of the full moon, and I set up my camera on a tripod in the car park facing down the lake, away from my area after dark, and filmed the moon coming up, coming out from behind the clouds, and it was lovely. Ruined a little bit by the odd plane zipping across the screen there. But yeah, it was just lovely, and I just thought, oh, this is perfect. So I could hear fish. It's all close in this bay. My furthest rod out was probably about 15, 20 yards, something like that. And I could see them coming out in the moonlight. And sure enough, at some time in the night, I think it wasn't even night, I think it was late evening or whatever, one of them ripped off, the closer one ripped off, and I had this fish. He didn't fight much in the pond because of the weed. He really is going to fight at the bank. I don't know what's the matter with this thing. He's bionic. Literally just knocked him. Well, it's crazy. I'm hoping we're going to manage to get him up there. This might be a mission. Are you going to behave for just a few seconds of video? Oh, cheers, mate. Perfect soundtrack. Someone's slamming a bloody great big iron door next to me. There we go. 22.5 common. I literally just thought, oh, I think I'll go to bed. I got in the bed, put my head on the pillow, and we were away. Right, he can go back. He's far too lively for his own good. As you say, it's not a massive fish, but as it turned out, that would be my session saver, because like an idiot, the next morning I decided that somewhere else looked better than where I was. You know, I always think the grass is greener on the other side, like always. Sometimes it's my saving grace and sometimes it's my downfall, if you like. And I moved, and I still regret moving. That retrospective thing where you look back at what you've done in a session, usually on the drive home, and you think, how could I have fished better? Well, I could have fished better by staying put, because the fish stayed put and I moved off of them, and I blanked on my last night. So I only managed one fish on that full moon, which was a bit of a disappointment. And the next week actually was even worse. It was weird. It was as if rather than the feeding peak around the full moon, it got worse. You know, they'd been feeding quite well. And that 2 week period wasn't particularly productive on the lake. This one weed bed I was telling you about, that was doing fish on a regular basis. But in general, it wasn't, you know, fishing what you'd call well. It weren't fishing its socks off as I'd expect at that time of year. The following week, I turned up, so a couple of weeks after the full moon, towards the end of the month, I turned up and pulled into the main car park. And there was a couple of guys fishing. The regular swims were taken, the helipad and Trudy's mate, and the ones that fished that weed. And there's 3 in the car park there. I think 2 of the 3, the better 2, were taken. And I thought, before I go for a walk round, it was early morning, there's a separate gate for this swim called the helipad. It's not, you wouldn't call it, it's like a peninsula of its own with this one swim on the end, but it doesn't stick out into the lake. It is the end bank of the lake. But it's got its own gate, and there's a river the other side of a little path and the lake the other side. So in a way it is sort of a peninsula, but it is the side of the lake as well. And you go through this little gate and you walk up this little path, it's lovely, and you get to this swim at the end, which is right under the bridge that separates K1 from the island lake, which originally they were all one lake, one massive great big lake, with this iron bridge going across the middle, and then underneath the bridge there's been added a wire fence, grate if you like, which separated it into 2 lakes, years and years and years ago. So you've got 2 separate entities, the Island Lake and K1, and this swims right by that sort of divide, if you like. And I wandered up there, and there was a guy, Jack I think his name was, fishing there. I just wandered up for a chat, and I thought I'd have a chat with him, because from that swim you see right down the lake, and I might pick up a couple of pearls of wisdom in myself. There's been a few showing down wherever or whatever. So I got chatting to him, and he was in the process of tidying stuff away and doing what have you, and he said, I'm actually off this morning, and he'd had some fish, I can't remember, he'd had a few fish, can't remember how many, and he was packing up and going, and nobody had sort of put a bucket in there or whatever, there was nobody booked to go in. And I stood there and I thought about it, and I thought, it's very hard to get in that swim. It's a very popular swim. Now, I don't like going in after people, especially if they've caught, because I generally think the damage might have been done. The fish have been caught, they've moved on. But this swim was a regular producer, and the style of fishing on those sort of smaller, busy lakes, you've got to adjust to it. You know, and when I first started on there, I had to adjust to, you know, bucketing swims and planning after other anglers, you know, or around other anglers, how you're going to move around the lake. And that's probably a situation that a lot of you find yourself in. You know, if a top swim becomes available, you just go straight in there. It goes against everything that I think in here, but at the same time, like I say, you adapt and overcome. And I thought, this is a good swim, it's just about to be empty. I would be foolish not to go in here for at least the first night. I got a couple of nights, and I thought, I'm at least going to do my first night. So I did the bucket thing and went off and left him to it. It's nothing worse than someone hovering about behind you, is there? If you're vacating a swim and they're going in, you don't want them there. You feel obliged to hurry up, and that wasn't the case at all. So I left my bucket there and went off for a walk around the lake and chatted to a few people and what have you. And I didn't go anywhere near the swim until I was back in the car park chatting to somebody else, and I see him come out and he waved it's free. And I looked at my phone actually, and he'd actually messaged me a little while earlier and said it was you know, he was then going, but fair play to him. So I've gone in there and had a look, and like I say, there's this weed bed, and it's out there to the right, and you can see it on the surface. It's only a small weed bed, and it's right in front of this bream swim. And it seemed wrong, to be honest, to cast right the way over there, however far it was, 15 wraps or whatever, and land what looked like right in front of this other little swim, which was unoccupied. So I put a marker out there, exactly where you were allowed to on your wrap thing, and right as close to this weed as I could, and I found a lovely clear spot, and I thought, that's prime, that is. But I'm going to go and have a look. So I took a rod with me, and I went all the way around. You have to go out and over the bridge and round the other side and through a gate and through another gate and through a wiggly woggly path, and you get into this little swim that's all on its own there. And my marker's just like that, right in front of it. So I wrapped up this other rod and chucked out to where the marker was, and sure enough, it was right. It was beyond the short limit of this swim. This swim's only a marginal swim, and it was just beyond. And I thought, still, it's like, it would be so much easier to fish from here, but you know, I'll go along with the way you're supposed to do it, and I'll fish it from over there like everybody else does. And you know, someone's going to be fishing it from round there, and it's all a bit tight. But it's only because the fish had created this situation. Normally you wouldn't. There's lots of other water to fish from all of these 3 swims, but because of this weed bed, that was like the focal point of the swim, and that's where the fish were living, blatantly living. That's where they were getting caught on a regular basis. Now, a few weeks before, I decided on K1 to sort of go against the grain a little bit. K1 is very much a spod water. Everybody spods, and in general, chopped baits, you know, a bucket of stuff, whether it's boiling particle or pellet and whatever bits, you know, minced boilies, dips, stuff. So you've got a bucket of bits and pieces, and it's spodded out. You find your spot, bosh, you know, tea time on there, you see spods flying out all over the place. That's the style of fishing on there, and it's very effective. But I decided I didn't want to do that, especially when I was fishing up that other end where it needed to be quiet. I very soon sussed out that spodding up there over the top of the fish would move them out. So I'd adopted more of a sort of an old school method, if you like. I'd gone back a bit. I'd gone back to using I haven't used a marker float for years. I'd gone back to using a marker float. The beauty of a marker float is, especially if you know roughly where your spots are, sometimes it's just one cast. Find your little spot, let your marker up. That shows you exactly where you are. You haven't got to work out your difference of your spod to your cast or whatever. Catapult, straight on top. I was using 18mm cell boilies. Cell's the going bait on all of that complex. They've seen so much cell, and it's such a good bait. It just works year after year after year. So I've got 18mm air dried cell boilies, and then I recoated them with the cell activator juice, so they were proper cell smelly. And up that other end, it's easy. It's all in catapult range. You know, 15 at a time, right on top. No casting, no nothing. Bring the marker in, clip the rod up the same as the marker was, but donk, and you know, you bang on it as accurate as you can possibly be, with as little disturbance as possible. And it had done me well. You know, I'd caught doing it. When I was in the open water at range, I'd used an air bomb a little bit, ones that you clip in the air and they open up and they fire the bait out. I haven't used one for quite a long while, and I've really got the hang of it. And so that I was doing it if I was fishing at distance, again, so that nothing was hit, because with them you whip them back before they hit the surface, so there wasn't any producing going on my spot. But in this particular swim, it was a few yards out of range of a catapult. I could get it with the catapult, but if I put more than one in, they'd start to spread, and I didn't want them spreading. I wanted them all on this spot on the back of this weed bed. So I decided to use a throwing stick. Now, like most places, K1 has got its own population of black-headed gulls. Now, black-headed gulls have evolved far beyond throwing sticks. There's no way you can use a throwing stick and get a single bait in the water if you've got a flock of black-headed gulls on your lake. It's not happening, because whether you know or don't, I don't know, but anything out of a throwing stick comes out with a backspin. So if you were to watch one hit the water, say if somebody was doing it from another bank and they were landing in front of you, you see a boilie come in from a throwing stick, it goes under the surface of the water, it's spinning backwards, which brings it up. So you get a splash, and then the boilie comes up nearly to the surface, and then it loses its spin, its momentum, and then it goes down. And that's the kill zone, the sweet spot for the black-headed gulls. And I always maintain, if a gull hits the water, it's got a bait. They don't waste energy. On them weird days where you get strange light and you're catapulting or throwing sticking or whatever, putting your bait out, and they're swooping but not taking them, it's because they know they can't get them. But if they know they can get them, they're going to take them. And every time a gull splashes down, I think it gets a bait, or 90% of the time it gets a bait. So if you're putting, 4 in a throwing stick and you're getting 4 splashes out there, there's a good chance you're just wasting your bloody time, because nothing's going down on the bottom. So I decided to employ Bob. Right then, my small dead friend. Time to bait up. Not to swoop yet. He is amazing. Well, he's not, because he's a piece of plastic, but but the result from him is unbelievable. I put out, I don't know, I don't weigh my bait. I've got these little buckets, I just tip them up. I think they take about 4 kg or whatever. So I put out about a goodly proportion of it, 2 or 3 kilos of 18mm baits with a throwing stick, with my little dead plastic gull. And you can see it was only in the margins. But of course from above, they see everything, don't they? And they see this dead gull and they don't want a part of it. And they group together and they spiral and they go up and up and they stay up there. And I'm there putting my baits out and they're all going sweet, and I'm just putting as much out as I needed. Only right at the very end, I put hundreds of baits out. Right at the very end, the last half a dozen, one gull peeled off and came down. He thought, that's plastic, surely. You must have sussed it. But I managed to bait up my swim, bird free, with the help of Bob. And sat back and just thought, this is perfect. Although I feel weird fishing in front of this other swim over there with someone fishing the back of the same weed, but there's a fair bit between us. We're not on top of each other or anything. Yeah, it felt a bit weird, the style of angling, but I thought this is what everybody does in this swim. That's where the fish blatantly are. I'd seen a few top while I'd been baiting up. I knew they was out there. And unsurprisingly really, I had a few bites. I think I had 5 fish that session, the first 4 of which were smaller specimens, if you like, a couple of smaller commons and a couple of double figure commons, and I think I had a couple of mid-20s from memory, I think, mirrors. But the last one I hooked was a totally different animal, different gravy. They all came from this same spot. 2 rods out there, so it's either rod, but they're both on the same spot on the back of this weed. And the last one I hooked, it was middle of the afternoon and it was drizzle, grey, dreary, pitter-pattering with rain. I was sat in the bivvy with the camera in front of me on a tripod, just filming the rods or whatever. And suddenly one of them's ripped off. Now, in my mind, I was going to step over and round the camera whilst filming, pick up the rod and play this fish, but it was never happening in reality, was it? The camera went flying in the mud and I had to set it back up while I'm playing the fish with one hand and trying to sort out the camera with the other. As soon as I looked at it, it took line. The others I'd pulled them away from the weed. This took a bit of line and managed to crash into some heavy weed, part of the weed bed out there. So consequently, I'm playing this fish with a huge ball of weed about 2, 3, 4 rod lengths back from the carp, which is the worst possible scenario. You can see here the way I'm playing it. I'm keeping the rod tip low at all times, or as much as I can, and that's so that it's not me and the weed putting strain on the hook. By holding the rod low, I can slide the braid through the floating weed bed, and if the fish wants to take line, it can take it back through the weed bed without the added weight of the weed actually pulling on the hook, because the fish was on the surface the whole time, which again is not a good scenario when all your line's out the water. But it's even worse when you've got this big swing tip thing of weed bouncing up and down on the line. So it was a nightmare. And he went right and he went left and he went under the other rod and then back over the other rod, and it was nip one, pearl one and what have you. But eventually, after quite a long battle, during which, like I say, he was on the surface, I could see it was a good fish, much better, a definite 30 pounder. I could see it was this good fish, but eventually I managed to sugar it so that the weed bounced down the line and ended up on the head of the fish, which stops them in their tracks, doesn't it? They can't see what they're doing, they're cocooned in weed, I don't know whether they think they're safe or whatever, but they don't fight as hard when they've got that big thing of weed over their faces. And I managed to steer the whole lot into the net. Straight away on first view I thought, oh, that's a better fish. Yeah, it was this big, long, linear type carp. Gorgeous, gorgeous fish. He's a monster. And I knew that there was a fish in there called Boris, which is a big linear. It's called, that's a weird name, and it's more like the name you give to a spider than a carp. It was called Boris because the first time it was ever caught over 40 pounds was the day that Boris Johnson got elected, or whatever he got in. So this fish is called Boris, and I assumed it was that fish. Now, I hooked him out and I weighed him, and he was 38 something, I believe. 38 pound, thereabouts, then I believe. Which is down a little bit. I think it was normally a 40 pounder around that time of year, but I assumed it was this fish Boris, and I was well chuffed with it. As you can see, it's a gorgeous fish. So what do we reckon on him then, folks? Eh? Is he the absolute daddy or what? That's him. Back he goes. One last close up of that side. After the event, I'd sent a picture to Mike Bromfield, who's a bit of a K1 expert. He's caught nearly everything in there, I think, and has got like photos of everything and knows what fish are what fish, and he sent back and said, no, it isn't, it's not Boris, it's just one of the other, there's another 2 or 3 quite big linears in there, and it was one of them. Which is mad, isn't it, how a fish like that can be just another one. You know, if that was in most lakes, that would be your main target. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous fish, but you know, that tells you something about the stock of the fish in K1, that it's not even, you know, to use a well-worn phrase, one of the A team as such. You know, it's not one of the main characters of the lake. But what a fish, you know, linear, 38 pounds, it's just stunning. So that was my little session in the helipad, and a blinding success, really. You know, 4, it might have been 5, I can't remember. Yeah, 5, I think. I think I had 5 carp that trip. All from this one weed bed, which was just crazy. That it, in a way, it was a bit disappointing because it reinforced the fact that that was the main spot to get. If you could get one of those angles onto this little tiny weed bed, then you were more likely to catch a fish than not, which is an odd situation, isn't it? Especially as there was weed, you know, in other parts of the lake. The car park bay was full of weed, and the dog bay was full of weed. And they did fish. Obviously, all the fish in K1 were sat around this one poxy little weed bed. But it was a very, very good feature and very productive. Now, like I say, we was into October now, and I had quite a busy October, sort of booked, if you like. I don't usually book anything in September and October apart from fishing. But I was going on holiday. We decided on the spur of the moment, me and the missus, it seemed like years since anyone's been anywhere, doesn't it? You know, holidays, COVID put paid to all of that, didn't it? But we decided, you know, we'd had enough. We were going to go on holiday. So we booked a week in Cyprus. So that was one of my weeks used up. I'd also got, if you remember, we did a raffle. There was various things, actually, loads of different events as a sort of collective fundraiser for the Ian Macmillan thing, the Ding Dong Fund, if you like, towards the cancer support. And Raff, who owns RK Leisure, had put up the Hut Island on Raisbury One South Lake, which is it used to be an outbounds island in the middle of the lake, but it's been now repurposed into a private hire island. So you can hire the whole island. There's 5 swims out there and a beautiful lodge, sort of like more like a big gazebo, open-sided. It's got half sides, so you're not shut away in a big garden shed. It's like, I've got a little bit of video. I'll show you that first. Look at this posh lodge. Perfect, because you don't feel like you're not going in a lodge, because it's got open sides. Yeah, it's not like sticking yourself in one of these glorified garden sheds. Get in for a barbecue. That's a proper job, isn't it? When you sit here, you can still see out, see your rods. Sounder box on the table. I've been down the pub. Mountain of logs drying out for the fire pit, which is out there between those benches. Sunk into the ground there. Even got electric, I tell you, electricery. Hey, how jolly civilised. Love it. I'd like this in my garden, if it'd fit. Very nice indeed. You got 5 swims spaced around, facing out different ways. All very, very nice. 2 out the back here into the Dredger Bay. That one there goes to the Route Nightmare. That one on the end goes across the old Bryant's Point area. And down the wiggly path. There he is in the distance, Mr. Dredger. Lovely swims. And this one was prime territory really, because it's right in the mouth of the Dredger Bay entrance. Zoom out, how do we do that? There we go. Douglas Lane Point in the distance. Route Nightmare over there with somebody fishing it. And then this channel, which they always used to love. I know they're different fish and everything, but fish are fish, aren't they? Perfect little channel through into the dredger. Lovely. So that's the island, that's what the island looks like. And Raph had put this up as a prize for the raffle, and I'd put myself up as part of that prize. So there was various raffles for various different things, and one of them was to fish for 48 hours with me on this island, which had been won by a guy called Jamie, and we'd arranged to do that in October as well. So I'd got a week in Cyprus and a week on this island, so I only left a couple of weeks of that month. And in November, on November the 1st, I'd got a ticket starting on Yateley Car Park Lake for the winter. So I was intending to go there from November the 1st. I mean, not exclusively, obviously. I've still got K1 can fish very well in the winter, especially in February. But I've got both tickets, and I wanted to start in November on Yateley and just see how I got on there. So that was the plan. So I'd only got these sort of 2 weeks free out of the whole month. So I decided to do the first one, which was the week before I went on holiday on K1. I was having a few good results on there. It was, it was shaping up to be a very good autumn, and I thought I'll have one final trip on there. Then I'll go on my holiday, then I'll do something with my spare week, and then I'm off to Yateley. So I rocked up on this last week, and I went up the top end, the smaller end, the bit I like, and I went straight into my favourite swim up there. Everything looked good, the wind was pushing in there was nobody up there. It looked absolutely prime, to be honest. But this time of year, or that time of year, everything becomes nocturnal, doesn't it? If you want to see fish, if you want to hear fish, you've got to be awake at night. That's the name of the game. Once you get mid-late September, night times become so much more important. It's tempting, I know, especially like now, in November, gets a bit chilly at night. You get your phone out, or your Kindle, or your DVD player, or whatever, and you get nice and warm, and it's great. The rods are fishing, aren't they? You get blinded by those screens. If you do hear something in the night, you're like that, you can't see anything. By the time your eyes have refocused or adjusted to the darkness, is way too late. So it's well worth having, even if it's only the first couple of 3 hours of darkness, watching the lake, which is what I did up this end. And I didn't see a thing. I didn't hear a thing. I didn't get any line bites. I'm fishing drops on the bobbins, specifically to, if anything comes through, that I'd get some sort of an indication. Nothing. And in the daylight hours, I didn't see a bubble. It was dead up there. It was devoid of carp. Now, normally I'd stay till sort of 10, 11 before, relocating. By the next morning, by about 8 o'clock, I was all packed up. Everything was on the barra. I was ready to go. And, about 8:15, I sod it, just brought the rods in, put them back in the bag, got my little bucket, but I'm going for a walk. I know I'm moving. I might as well do it early. I might be early enough to still maybe see a sighting or something. So I went off for a walk around the lake. I got all the way around the back bank, past, the sort of popular swims and a few empty swims and what have you. And I got up to Trudy's mate, which is the one that fishes out to this weed. And there was a guy in there, and he'd had a couple. There was someone across the other way in Helly. And I walked around the corner, like I say, on this little peninsula where it's all on its own, is the bream swim. It's empty. I just put my bucket down, sat on it, rolled a fag, and I'm looking out across the water, and I'm thinking to myself, I could go in here. The weed bed that's producing fish is just there, 25 yards to 35 yards out. You're allowed to fish up to 30 yards from this swim. So I can fish up against this weed, no problem. I thought, but I'm not going to like it. I know I'm not going to like it, because at some stage there's going to be incoming from that side and incoming from that side. And later on in the day when they rebait, there's going to be spoms going, and we're all going to be fishing in the same hole. I thought, I'm not going to like it, but it's a very good area. I'm sat there, debating, thinking about it, smoking my fag, and then one's come up just there, right in front of me, and I cannot ignore that. I can't walk off now and go and fish in another swim when there's a fish, good one, had just come out there, 25 yards out, right there, up against the weed. Oh, I've got to do it. So I legged it back round, got my barrow, threw everything on. Now my barrow, I've got one of them, I bought a Makita barrow rather than buy a fishing branded electric barrow. I bought a Makita slabbing barrow, so for paving slabs and building material. I thought that's going to be as strong as you can get. I bought it on recommendation, actually. F told me about it and said Lockie had got one, and I phoned up Lockie and he said, oh, it's the best thing ever. It isn't. I thought it would be the best thing ever. It'll probably outlast everything else out there, but there's a few things that aren't exactly as you'd want on it. One of them is the speed. I had a look on the little plaque on the motor the other day. I think flat out speed is 3.6 miles an hour. That's top speed. It's got 2 speeds. Now we walk at 4 miles an hour when you're just strolling. I believe that's 4 miles an hour. When you've just seen a fish jump and you want to get to swim double quick and get your baits out, that's got to be 8 miles an hour, isn't it? This poor barrow. I got my finger, I got it on number 2 and I got the button down or the handle up. But it's whining at me because I'm not only using the motor, I'm running along, I'm pushing it as it's all getting over torqued. I'm like, come on, get around there. It's bouncing about, it's nearly gone over twice. Eventually I've got to it. It's as far, this swim, it was as far as I could have gone on the lake from where I started without going the other way. Yeah, it was literally diametrically opposite. Don't know where that came from. Other corner of the lake from where I was. So I've gone all the way around there, got there into the swim, literally undone the bungee clip and just tipped the whole lot, thrown it all on the floor, chucking stuff everywhere because whatever it was I wanted, the bait was at the bottom underneath everything, obviously. So I tipped everything out all over the place. Rods have still got hook baits on. Grabbed one of them, walked down to the front of the swim, just a little donk, bonk, and it doinged as it hit the bottom, exactly where this fish had shown. I thought that'd do. Loosened the clutch, turned the rod upside down, laid it on the deck. Thought there's room for another one out there. Turned around, got the second rod out, just putting it together, and I can hear this. And I'm thinking, what is that? For a second I thought I'd knocked something electronic on in my bag and all my gear. I'm sort of looking around and I've looked at the rod and the tip's going like that and the spool's going and things clattering along the gravel. Oh shit. I've been there seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, no time at all. And I got a bite straight away. I looked into this fish, no real dramas, it obviously wasn't a big one. Pulled him back from the weed, circled him round, I could see him splashing around, he's zigzagging, it's always the sign of a smaller fish in it when they can change direction in seconds. Pounced about with him a little bit in the edge and whew, in he's gone. And sure enough, he was a stocky mirror, a nice one, but I don't know, somewhere 15 to 20 pound, 18 pound, whatever, something like that. So I unshipped him and let him go, more intent in getting the rod back out there as quickly as possible for a better one. So I checked everything is fine. Donk that one out there. I thought I was just going to put another one right next to it. So I got the other rod, plop, 8 foot away from it, catapult, put a few boilies out. Hardly needed to pull the elastic with 18mm baits, just like put about 20 baits over the top of it all. I thought I've had the disturbance, I've had a fish, so it's going to be a while before they move back in. I get another shout, set it up on the alarms, donk, put the kettle on. Kettle hadn't even boiled. Boom, I'm away again. I've looked into this one straight away. I thought, this is different. this ain't a little one. He's just yanked it over, stripped line, not lots, didn't need a lot, and buried himself in this weed. Now I can see this weed, this surface weed bed, it's sort of running away from me. There's a line about a couple of rod length and a half on the surface, and there's a little gap, and then there's a round a bit. It's obviously joined, but just under the surface, running out, and it's about 3/4 of a rod length wide, this strip of weed. And he's ploughed into it, and I've bent down, and I've sort of, I thought, right, okay, don't pull too hard, but he's not coming, it's solid. So I started bouncing. I do a thing with the tip with braid, useless with mono because he's just stretching the mono. If I get a fish in weed, if you grab a bit of weed in the margins and try and pull and it won't come out, don't matter how hard you pull, it don't come out. But if you jag it, it's a different strain, isn't it? And it pulls or tears the weed. So I'm jagging the rod tip like that, and then I've seen at least a third of this surface weed bed has sort of collapsed a bit and then up a bit and collapsed a bit. So he's obviously gone in quite deep and turned, and then it's broken free. So this highly productive surface weed bed out there is now a third smaller than it should be, and this third is coming towards me, like on the surface, and slowly, almost like breathing, as this fish is obviously underneath, just swaying from side to side. I could feel it sort of slightly bouncing. And I pulled it, and eventually I've got this in the edge, and I've seen a tail come on the back of it. And I thought, oh, that's a big tail. That's a proper big tail, that is. Fed the net in. I've just slid the whole lot over the arms of the net. Can't really see what's going on, but I can see the tail. So the tail is just resting on the cord at the back. So I think he's over the net. Shook it all in there. Torn off the weed. As I've ripped the weed off, the first thing I thought, or the first feeling I had, was one of disappointment. Because I looked in and thought, oh, how's your luck, lady? That's the same fish. The same linear that you had from the helipad the other week. You know, same similar sort of size, same markers, same fish. So I pulled the weed off a bit despondently. Thought, God, there's enough fish in here. I don't want to go catching the same one straight away. And as I've sort of righted him in the net, ready to deal with him, and I've seen across his back, I thought, that ain't the same fish. That's, instead of being yay wide, it's yay wide. That's a big fish. That's a proper big fish. It was a linear. And I looked at the tail. I thought the tail was enormous. Oh my God, that is an absolute monster. I had no idea what it could be. So I've got the arms out of the net, got the mat ready, and lifted him. As soon as I lifted him, I thought, you're a 40 pounder all day long. You know, absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And I've got this new weigh bar thing that Solar give me, you know, for your scales, and it unscrews in two, and the thread goes in your landing net pole, so it makes you know, if you haven't got anything to hang them on, I always like to hang them. I can't just hold them like that, they bounce all over the place. So I did this thing, got it up there, so it's rock solid, and the needle just went donk, 45 pounds. It's like, geez, I didn't even know there was a 45 pound linear in the lake. Well, there wasn't. Turns out this fish is Boris. It's the one that I thought it was before. It is Boris at its best ever weight. It's gone up in weight from a low 40 to a 45 pounder. Are just unbelievable. First one was about 15 pounds. The second one is a 45 pound linear. Yep, you heard it right. 45 pounds. Oh my God. I thought he was big. I didn't realize he was quite that big. Wow. Bloody wow. Look at him, hey? He's a bloody monster. Nice. Oh. Actual beast of a fish. As you can see from that video, it's a bit blurry in the middle of the screen, isn't it? Because he had a bit of a flapping fit on the mat, and obviously I've got a load of water on the mat that I've tipped over him, and he's thrown a tail full up, and I didn't realise, but it's gone splat right in the middle of the camera. But luckily it missed the stills camera, so I did get some beautiful photos, like still photos of him. And it's a gorgeous fish. And I'd been in the swim no time at all, and I'd had 2 bites. It's just unbelievable. You know, I thought, what's to come? But bizarrely enough, all that came after that was rain and incoming. There was other leads coming in, and those fish, I didn't get another bite. I didn't really care, to be honest. You know, I'd caught that amazing mid-40 linear. I was happy with that. I only had that night left to do. I had a lovely barbecue later on. I had a few beers in celebration, as you would. It tipped it down that night. It was a monsoon all night. Now, K1's got a reputation of not fishing very well during the rain, actually while it's raining. And that was proper rain. That was biblical. Everything was just full of water in the morning, you know, my barrow, the way I hadn't covered it properly. Everything was drenched. Everything was splattered that had come up off the ground over it, all up halfway up the sides of my bivvy, all my rods, everything. It was absolutely torrential. There was puddles and flooding everywhere. But hey ho, I'd had a lovely night inside my bivvy, looking out my little pillbox door, watching the rain beat down and thinking, I've caught a great big one. And I knew that, you know, for a while at least, that was going to be my last night. It was the end of my autumn, if you like, on K1, and what a way to finish. And in the morning, the rain stopped, and it was nice and dry for packing up. I've got some very, very wet gear to pack away after last night's deluge. It absolutely chucked it down all night. There's puddles everywhere. But there you go. Not sure, no idea when you'll actually get to see this, because I'm a little bit busy for editing it all. I'm sure at some stage you will. It'll be retrospective by then, but that's the way it goes. Right, I need to pack up, make my way around to the lodge, have a shower, get a bit respectable, drive over to Guildford, and hopefully I'll go past a garage that's open and actually has some diesel. That'd be a result, wouldn't it? Just don't forget what time I'm filming this. We're in the middle of the madness. I don't know how that's going to pan out. I'm hoping to get back from holiday and it's all over. People have regained their senses, gone back to buying toilet rolls instead of diesel. Anyway, waffling now. See you all later. Ta-da! Done my little bit of video, chucked stuff on the barrow, off home, on a plane, off to Cyprus for a week. Right result. And we did have a result, actually. A bizarre thing happened. We'd booked, in Cyprus, and I said to them, it was me and the missus, just the two of us. I said, let's do some stuff. Let's go out on boat trips and stuff. So I'd booked a sunset cruise on this massive yacht. It was called the Ocean View. It's the biggest one. We'd gone down to the harbour for a meal on the first night, I think it was, and we'd seen this ship, basically, this yacht. It's enormous, 3-tier, all lit up, beautiful thing. And I said, let's have a wander down, have a look at the boards and that. And sure enough, you could book cruises on it. And the next night was a sunset cruise on this boat. And it was a cruise, there was music, there was it advertised all this sort of stuff. So can't let's book that. So we booked it for the next night. Anyway, the next night, coach turns up, goes around the hotels, and proper touristy stuff, you know. Goes around the hotels, picks you all up. So we go on outside our hotel, and there's a bloke there ticking you off as you get on, and gives you the little electronic sort of armband. It's just like one of these bangle things, but it's got a chip built in it, just to, I don't know, whatever, monitor who goes on, who comes off, and make sure the same amount of people come off as go on, I suppose, I don't know. Anyway, he's done that, and he's picked up from a few more hotels, and then he's walked up, and he's stopped at our seats, if you like, and he said, it's Dave, isn't it? I said, yeah, because I only said Lane, and I said, and you're a carp angler then, aren't you? He said, yeah, I am. Anyway, we got chatting. I said, well, you live out here doing this? He said, no. He said, I'm an IT guy, and this is one of my jobs, if you like, and I come out here a couple of times a month for a couple of days or whatever and sort out things like the wristbands and the, I don't know, whatever IT you have on a massive, great big multi-million-pound yacht thing. And we had a little chat, and that was the end of it. Anyway, we'd gone on the boat, me and the missus, and you get on a table with loads of other people, and the beer's free, the alcohol, you know, the bar's free, there's all the food's free. They've got this massive sound system, and everyone's dancing. They've got a huge firework display and what have you. halfway through all of this, matey reappears with two other fellas, a Cypriot guy and an English guy, who were the owners of the boat. And he just brought them along to say hello, which was pretty cool. You know, this monstrous, great, very, very expensive yacht. I did know it. I think it was about 18 million or something. Ridiculous money anyway. Anyway, we got chatting and this, that and the other. And it topped out in the end, just before they left, one of the owners said, oh, we do a daytime cruise as well, which is like swimming and you jump down a slide off the boat and a barbecue on the back and all that. And he gave us 2 complimentary tickets because I was a mate of, well, you know, because the other fella knew me. So through carp angling, basically. So the next, we had all of that, it was a blinding night. And the next morning we got up, had breakfast and went back out on it. It was like our own yacht for a couple of days. But yeah, so some benefits to being a smelly old carp angler. And eventually when I got back home, like I say, the next week we were out on the island on Raspberry One. Me and this guy Jamie, and it was great. It was lovely out there, and we put the barbecue to great use. You know, I did loads of cooking. I had a little sound system out in the thing with the fairy lights on. Oh, it was beautiful. And we caught fish. We had half a dozen fish between us. You know, got some nice photos and stuff, and he had a lovely time, and I had a lovely time, and it was great. But that left 1 week. I had 1 week before November the 1st when I could get onto Yateley. And I thought, what do I do with that week? I go back on K1, which I didn't really want to, because I thought I've had a really good autumn on there. You know, I've had a string of good fish, big fish. And if I go back on there and it's too busy, or I go back on there in a blank or whatever, I just thought I'd stopped at a nice cut-off point at the end of autumn on there. Perfect. I got this 1 week and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on the island lake. I love the island lake. It's only next door. And I fished it on and off for the previous couple of years. It's a job to tell, isn't it? With the COVID shit. What's what and which sessions go into which category of what season. Because if you've got the COVID and the lockdown 1 and the lockdown 2, and then add to that the spawning when most of the lake shuts, sometimes all of the lake, sometimes it's half the lake, and they spawned about 3 or 4 times, so shut and open. We probably had half a dozen days that were like the first day of the season in 1 year. And I sort of lost track a bit of which year was what. But it didn't matter. I'd done a bit on the island. I love the island lake. And I thought I'm going to go back on there. I've only got 3 nights. I got 1 session. I'd managed to get 3 nights somehow. And I thought, I'm going to break the boat out and I'm going to go out on the island lake and, yeah, just have a lovely time. Hey, here we are, look. Afloat again. Out on the islands. Oh, it seems like ages. It is ages. But we're back in a boat, back on the water. All we need now is to see one jump. It's probably, but stage 1 is complete. All loaded. Doing the wild thing. And the weather was perfect. It was perfect for my favourite swim on the island lake. It's a swim called Snags 2. But I only like it in a southwesterly wind, which is weird. Don't picture in your mind that if you sat there the southwesterly wind's coming at you, because it isn't. It's going past you and you're only halfway down the lake. So your southwesterly wind's coming from there, going through your swim and all the way down, hundreds and hundreds of yards further down the lake into a bay at the bottom. But it's a strange swim. The bottom of the lake is deep until you get to the right hand side of the swim, the edge, and then the next swim is shallow. So I think that crease on the bottom, as all the bottom across the lake comes up, creates a false end of the lake. I think it's got its own undertow. You know, we must have, otherwise there'd be a hill of water at one end. I think it comes along and some of it turns and goes back and creates, if they don't want to go on the shallower, that creates a barrier, an end of the lake, and they love it in the southwesterly, and the stronger the southwesterly, the more they like it. I caught quite a few fish out of this swim. I caught the big one out of this swim, the whatever it was before, 2 COVIDs ago, whatever. I caught the big one out of this particular swim. Now, right at the back of the swim is a little bar, a long way over, 150 yards or whatever. It's boating lake, so there's no drama. And I caught nearly all of my fish from one spot on the end of this bar, one particular spot, and it had to be a particular spot. There's loads of spots there which I haven't caught off of, and I've tried to put 2 rods on there. It's always this one little spot, but I know it now. I don't have to be able to see through the water or anything. If it's murky, it's no problem. With a prodding stick, there's certain things on this bar. The bar is actually a pile of rubble. It's got hideous stuff on it. Right at the back is a couple of iron bars sticking out, but they're further back than you'd fish, so they're no danger. And then there are slabs of pieces of concrete, like breeze block and stuff like that, half a breeze block. There's a rolled up, what looks like lino or carpet embedded in the bottom in one spot on there. There's two or three buckets pushed together, yellow builder's buckets that are sunk into the bottom, and there's just a little bit of the mouth of them, the lip and the top edge sticking out the bottom. It's basically a pile of junk. It's been tipped there, and when they were digging the pit probably. And by feeling all these different bits, I know what they are because I've seen them. I know where the spot is, and this is my main spot in this swim. And I've often struggled to get bites on other rods in there. It's a very deep swim. It's a big bowl of deepness. Like I say, the right hand side as you go out of the swim gets shallower and can get weedy. The left hand side, there's another island beyond the island that you're on an island there. The next island is there, and you can fish the corner of that and the mouth of the channel that comes down. But in general, it's a big deep hole, and you're fishing over the back or out the sides of it. So the bit in front of you, I've never caught a fish from that bit, I don't think. Normally bald, deep, 14, 15 foot, silty, boring, uninteresting. Fish show there, but I think they're transitory. They're coming through the gap between the 2 islands down the back channel up here. It's like a bit of a crossroads there, and obviously if they're going through, they'll show there. But I've never had bites there. I think it's done bites, especially on zigs. I think it's perfect for a zig there, but that weren't the style I was intending to use. I wanted to fish on the bottom, good time of year for feeding. So got one out. I got there late, if I remember correctly. I think I'd been to my daughter Amy's down in Crawley, and I was coming back from there, so I didn't have a lot of time to look all around the lake. And I had to get in a swim. I was chasing sunlight basically. It was going to get dark. I only had an hour or two. Thought, I know this swim. I could just put them out there on the spots, and then I've still got 2 nights. If I need to move, I'll move. So I've gone in there, gone out there, found my little bar. I was surprised because it was weedy around it. It's not normally weedy there at all. Found my spot. That's the first one. Gone out and looking around, and I've looked around at the echo. I hadn't even bothered. I've got it on, but I hadn't paid any attention to it. What's going on with my echo? 7 foot. It should be 15 foot. 9 foot, 6 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot, 4 foot. And that's bizarre. I realised it's weed. The whole lake, I hadn't even considered it. It's been a very weedy year, and it's grown weed in this big deep bowl. I wasn't expecting it. And the whole of the bowl is weed, and I thought that might change the entire aspect of the swim. It's not now. They're not passing over a void anymore. There's weed. There might be new spots. They might hang about. So, I looked in all this weed for spots. Very hard to come by. I found hardly anything. But eventually, I found 2 other marks and got settled in for the night. Now, as expected, hour after dark, I've heard one. So got my chair out there, sat right down by the rods. Another one. Then I've heard off in the distance, right on the far bank where I'm fishing. And another one. Then I've seen 2 or 3 close in where you wouldn't expect to see them, but like I say, it's weedy. It's a different swim. Anyway, throughout that, up until whenever it was I went to bed, when I'd had enough Doom Bar or Speckled Head or whatever it was I was drinking that night, I heard quite a few fish, and I went to bed proper confident. Anyway, come the morning, I woke up and I had a bite, and I was expecting a bite. I thought, that's bizarre. Maybe not even the hotspot hadn't done a bite. Maybe I've done it wrong. Maybe I've put it behind the boulder, or it slipped down the bar, or whatever. So I thought, I'm going to redo the rods. And I'd noted where the fish that I'd managed to see in the night had been showing. And at first light, I see 3 or 4 as well. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to look in that area. And I'm going to redo my bar rod. Now, I went out with the rod to redo the bar rod rather than wind it in, and just lifted it up, and it seemed perfect. And I prodded around. I thought, yeah, he's perfect. It's spot on. So I re-dropped that. Found 2 new spots, and thought, I've seen enough fish in here to do my second night. You know, because when I don't catch in 24 hours, it's for a night. It's very rare for me to stay put. But everything I'd heard had been out there, and I chatted to another couple of guys. There was one other guy on my island on the end, and he'd seen next to nothing, and there hadn't been much caught. It seemed like I was sitting on the mother load out there, so I kept my gob shut and just, you know, carried on. Found 2 new spots, settled in for the night. Same thing. As soon as it got dark, one's gone over, another one. I'm thinking, at least I'm fishing better. I'm fishing more in these zones where these fish are showing. Woke up in the morning, just before light, just getting light, you know, that sort of half light in the morning. I can't believe I've not had a bite. I cannot believe I haven't had a bite. And then bang, one's gone. I'm down there, bent into this fish. Got him in no real dramas. Gone in the net, and he's a proper Humpty Bumpty sort of fella. He was quite big. He was 34 pounds, I think he was. Yeah, 34 pounds. High backs. I took some video of him, but I couldn't have been fully awake because I didn't have... the focus was completely out. I don't know what was in focus, a distant tree or something. It's totally unusable, but I got these pictures of him anyway. And you can see he's an odd-shaped fella, but he's a proper character. And I spoke to Gav, Gav up there, and he said he'd caught that fish 3 years previously at 18 pounds. Yeah, that's a good growth rate, but it's not a growth rate you expect on something that's a little bit odd shaped like that. They're usually slower growing, aren't they, when they're growing in all different directions, like a Quasimodo thing. But it was a result, it was a fish, and it was a new spot. But still, my hotspot hadn't done anything, not a single bite, which I found really, really weird. Anyway, during that morning, after I'd slipped the fish back, sat there having a cup of tea, and I was looking out, and I see either 3 fish or 1 fish 3 times, but they were good shows. They weren't little douches, they were like proper boom. And they were right over, very near to where my cane was. I could see my cane in the distance on this bar, but they were further back into the lake and a little bit further left, and I sort of lined them up with this orangey tree or whatever, a bush and I thought, you know, every time they were bang on the same spot. Good shows. I thought, that's interesting, I'm going to look out there a bit later. So when I redid my rods at midday or whatever, I wound them in, I went to the shops and got some more grub and this, that and the other. Gone out there and started to redo them. Now, with a boat, you'd think it might make it sound easy. If you haven't boat fish, you might, you know, a piece of fish, just go out there and go, oh, there's a nice spot. There was no visibility. It's quite cloudy, the water. And from a boat, it's actually harder to find spots than it is from the bank. Much, much, much harder. Because from the bank, you're casting out, you're using the methods that you're used to using, that you understand, and you go down and straight away you think, oh, that's no good, donk, and then you no, it's weed, or oh, that's a spot, and you clip it up and you wrap it up, and every cast towards the fir trees on the 18 wraps is clear, and you found a spot. From a boat, if you go out there, you've got options. You've got an echo sounder, which they're okay, they're a good first move, if you like. You know, if you've got jaggedy weed showing, then you've got a flat bit, it's a good indicator. It's worth looking in that area. They're not that accurate. You've got a prodder, a long stick that you can prod the bottom, so you're prodding, crunch, 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 gravel. That's easy, isn't it? But you don't know if it's weedy, because the weed grows up and you're just going straight down through it. So you have to put a marker there and then come back from the marker, or this is the way I do it, come back from the marker with a rod and then cast the rod with a little rig next to the marker and then pull sideways. And what happens if it's weedy? The boat just spins towards it and the leg locks up, obviously, in the weed. If it slides and the boat don't move, then that's cool. You can donk with a rod, so you just got a big lead and you donk, but that's the same as prodding. You're going down through the weed, so to actually find a clear spot can take quite a lot of time, and just because it's firm don't mean it's a spot at all. It can be solid down there. So anyway, I spent ages out there. I got one spot, obviously didn't have to do anything without a quarter fish off of that. I was scrapped my long spot. I thought that it hasn't done a bite for 2 nights. The weeds has changed the dynamic of the lake, so I scrapped that. And I had a good look around where this big fish had shown, or whether 3 fish had shown, or whatever, where there's 3 shows. I had a proper good look around, and then as I come over with the echo, I see a little flat spot through one of them spinny markers, like a little baby H block, Fox make them. Chucked that over just to mark it so I didn't lose it, and then came back round with a prodder, and sure enough, crunch, 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 and then dunk, 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 dunk. So I put the prodder on the mark. The wind was quite strong now, pushing me away. Lifted it about 2 inches off the bottom and let the boat go, so that the prodder's going along. That's the bottom. The prodder's dong, 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 and now it's 2 inches off and it's just going like this, and it moved without any resistance. And as soon as it touched weed, it kicked up in the air a bit, because obviously it's getting stuck in the weed. Gone back and done it again, and in the end I've sussed that it's a small spot about the size of this table. It's hard, not gravel. It had gravel round it, but it's hard, like clay or whatever, or sand probably. So it's probably a tiny hump, maybe only felt a few inches shallower, but it felt like it had been cleared off, and it had weed coming up all the way around it. And I thought, I'm trying to work it out. I'm a long way out, and I'm thinking it's near where them fish have shown. So I put a cane there, dropped a rig, baited out, come all the way back, put the rod down, and I deliberately didn't look. And I went and sat on my bed where I'd been sitting when these fish had showed, when I was sitting there having my tea and my breakfast or whatever. Looked down, pictured it in my head. I thought, right, orange bush, left of there. Looked up like that at where this spot was, and there was a cane sat right in the middle of it, or right behind it. I thought, that is 100% exactly where them fish showed this morning. I was well chuffed. Well, that's a bite. That is a bite. And I got one on my spot I'd had a bite from, and I'd found another little spot somewhere else. I think it was a casting spot, but whatever. I'd got 3 spots. A closer one I'd found, and I was well confident, like really confident. Confident enough to do a 3rd night in there. I'd caught one now, so it changes the game a little bit. And yeah, so settled in for the night again. Same thing. As soon as it got dark, bosh, one showed. Difference was this night, about 10 minutes later, the close rod's away. I'm like, oh, happy days. It's only 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, something like that. It's the evening. I don't think I'll even have my tea. Hooked into this fish. Got him in without any real drama. I think he was 30 pounds exactly, something like that. Right, here we go. We've had an early evening bite. Not on the rod that I expected the early evening bite on. Strangely enough, but I don't know, an early evening bite. So the early evening bite can come on the close rod a bit then. No, we're one rod down for now. Hey ho, we got a carp. So on the scales, 30 pounds. Lovely job. Good start tonight, better start. I thought, I'm fishing this swim better and better each day as the days go on. You know, because of the weed and that, I'm learning the spots better, and now I've got 2 spots that I've caught from, and I've got this blinder of a long spot where the fish have shown, which I'm surprised it wasn't that rod that went, you know. That's my main rod. I didn't stay up particularly late last night. If I hear them in another area, I'm not moving, am I? You know, that's it. In the morning, I'm packing up and I'm going home. Now, even if I say so myself, that's a pretty impressive bankside dinner. We have lamb chops, Mediterranean vegetables, and sort of jacket potato mash. Gotta be happy with that, yeah. Yum, bloody yum. So there was nothing I needed to learn. I knew the fish were in front of me. I caught one. I caught 2 by now. So I had an early night of it. And again, woke up in the morning just as it was getting just starting to get light, and thought, Should have had another bite, and then beep beep on the long rod, and then beep beep again, and then whack, he's away. Gone down there, hit into this fish, got him back, nothing, a few yards, dong, it's just absolutely rock solid, and it's way out there, you know, and the wind's got up. You know, usually at night it calms off a bit, doesn't it? In the early morning it's dead flat calm, and then the wind gets up again, but it hadn't. The wind had got up throughout the night and it's pushing quite strong. I'm bending into this fish in weed, like solid weed. I thought, I'm not just going to jump in the boat and go straight out there. Conditions ain't all that. You know, I'll give him a few minutes, put it back in the rest, loosen the clutch just a little bit. You know, only just woken up. Made myself a cup of tea, rolled a fag. I thought, right, take your time, sort out what you're going to do. 10, 15 minutes later, nothing's happened. I've given it a little tug, still solid. I thought, I'm going to have to go out there. By now it's light enough to just about see what I'm doing. So life jacket on, put I already had an unhooking mat in the boat. Always have an unhooking mat in the boat. You can't drag one behind you on a landing net. For a start, the boat goes all over the place because it's like a drogue. If you drag them backwards by mistake, you're flooding the gills the wrong way. It's not good for them. Always got to have a mat in the boat. Got a mat in the boat, got my landing net, life jacket, done a quick check, pair of clippers in case anything goes drastically wrong and end up tangled in braid. Got the lot. So I've set the boat off, just wound myself out there, which is fine until I've got past the second island. So I'm in the channel, and because the wind's coming that way, the next one's given me some sort of shelter. I'm in the lee. As soon as I got past it, the boat's like being pushed that way, and I'm trying to wind, so I'm getting a little bit of engine forward and trying to keep the line tight, bit of engine forward. Eventually I've got out there and I'm almost on my cane. I can see my cane, it's just there, and the line's going down into this huge ball of weed. So I've wound down to it like that, like nothing's happening. So I've started to I put the rod down to break the weed, and as I've done that, the boat started moving again. It's only the line that's holding the boat from being blown backwards. So I've done this again, done this about 3 times, and thought, I am getting absolutely nowhere fast here. Anyway, just behind the weed, I was halfway through all this palaver, about 6 or 7 foot behind, I've seen a woof, and I can see a tail, and I thought, that's the worst possible scenario. He's not in this weed. This weed is on the line and he's behind it. So there's more line coming out the back, and he's over there. There was a smaller bit of weed and I could just see the tail out the back of it. Well, that's an absolute nightmare scenario. Tried breaking this weed off, but like I say, the wind was playing havoc and I kept ending up 10 yards away, and then having to wind myself back or engine myself back. In the end I thought, I'm going to put the rod down, I'm going to grab this weed and I'm going to hand line. So I've sort of dug my fingers in the weed. There's an anchor point at the front of the boat. I've grabbed hold of the braid and I'm just pulling the braid back, and the 2 bits of weed are coming together. As they've almost got together, there's a woof behind, and I've seen the tail come up on the surface, and I've seen the tail root. And the second I saw that tail root, I thought, you're one of 2 fish, mirror carp. I thought, you're one of 2 fish, because you're a 50 pounder. You're definitely, all day long, you're a 50 pounder. You're one or 2 fish. You're the one that I really want, which is a fish called Mike's Pet, which is the second biggest mirror in the lake, or you're the big one, which I've already caught. I really wanted it to be Mike's Pet. I really wanted it to be Mike's Pet. Anyway, I pulled it up towards the weed, and I got it all so that the fish is sort of touching the back of the weed. And I thought, I'm going to try the impossible here. I'm going to try coming from behind with the landing net, netting him backwards, which is not ever a good idea, but I've got this monster thing of weed that I don't know what to do with. So I've gone round with the landing net, and when I've touched him, whoa, he's gone on his side, and he's sort of hasn't bolted, but he hasn't liked it at all. And as he's come up, I've seen much more from the tail up to the middle of the body, and I knew then it was the big one. It wasn't the one I wanted. It was the biggest fish in the lake, but I've already caught the biggest fish in the lake. I mean, I joined the island lake specifically to catch myself a personal best, which is not the way I normally I don't usually fish 4 pounds. I want a big fish, don't get me wrong. I'd be lying if I said I didn't fish for big fish, because I like them, the bigger the better, and that's, you know. But I fished there for the weight of the fish, because it had been 60 pounds. And it was, you know, it had been high 50 a couple of times, and my PB from 20 years ago is the Sonny Eye at 55 and some ounces, and then a Burfield Common at 55 exactly. And you know, I wanted a new PB, I really did, and that's why I joined the Island Lake originally. And then I'd caught that fish at 54 pounds, which is just how it is, isn't it? So I hadn't gone back there to try and catch it at a bigger weight. I wouldn't do that. But I'd gone there because I had a spare week. But in my mind, you know, when I played through, oh, what would I like to catch from here? It was Mike's pet, a fish called the Red Mire Common, which I photographed and filmed for Gav at 44 pounds a year earlier, and a big fully scaled, which is a high 30 scraper 40, all beautiful fish. But you can't odds what picks up your bait, can you? And there I was, attached to a fish which was an absolute monster, biggest carp in the lake. So I've hand lined a bit more, and I've managed to get him into the weed, and as I'm pulling up, my leader is coming through this ball of weed. So I'm thinking he's here, you know. It only used a metre leader, and I'd got a metre of it out the water, out the weed, and I'm like hooked onto this weed right at the front of the boat. I've got the net there, rod's just laid down beside me, it's all hand lining, and I thought, right, you're there now. So I've got the landing net, and I've put it deep and come up from deep under the whole lot, and I'm thinking any slight movement now, do get anything wrong now, it's all over. So I've just pulled the weed apart, and I can see his cheek just there. So I don't know why I tried it, but it works. I put my hand on his cheek, because he's cocooned in this massive ball of weed, and I pushed, and the tails come up, and the whole bloody lot's got in the net. Weed fished the lot. Like, gotcha. Dragged it to the side of the boat, started throwing lumps of weed the size of cats out of this net. Like, sure enough, stripped the weed out, and there he is. It's Royd's biggest carp in the lake, and it looked massive. And when I tried to lift it out of the water onto the mat in the boat, you know, the boat's sinking right down. I got it on my knees and waddled back and waft down, put him on the mat. Just thought, you are absolutely enormous. Full speed ahead, straight back to the bank. Secured him in my net. And then I knew Gav was just up the way, so I phoned Gav and said, look, I apologised to Gav first. I texted him to start with and said, oops, sorry. That's all I said. And he sent back, Royd's, question mark. I was like, yeah. Said, you know, I'll swap you if you can catch Mike's pet. Because that's the one he wants. He's caught most of the other fish in there, you know, all the big ones. And that's the carp that he wants to catch. And I was like, sorry. But he said, oh, great, I'll come over and do some photos and some video. Now, when I first caught it, the year before, there was a rule in place, a short-lived, silly rule, don't know where it came from, that you had to photograph anything over 40 pound in the water, which is a big mistake. I don't care what the situation is, it's a big mistake. Because fish in the water, or even in the mat and everything, they're in the lake, they know they're in the lake, they want to go home, they think they're going home, they misbehave terribly, they kick, they thrash, everything. You don't get very good photos because there's no choice of, like, it was a bright sunny morning when I caught this fish at 54 pound and the sun was there. There's no shade when you're out in the lake. It was a piss shallow margin. We had to wade out with it. You're in bright sunlight. It's quite a pale fish. The photos weren't brilliant. The video was very short-lived because the thing was just misbehaving, and I had to put him back, you know. So I thought, you know, it is my biggest fish ever, so it's worthy. Photos, video, the whole kit and caboodle. I found a hook that someone had put in the trees, you know, that was, I got on it and swung on it and everything, and it was peg or something, you know, yeah, proper strong. Put the scales up on that, plopped him up there while I'm waiting for Gav to come over, hoofed him on. It just went like almost right the way round to 60 pounds. I was like, oh my god. And I sort of polished the shitty old glass and had a little bounce, and I looked, 58 pounds 12 ounces. So, you know, I had got the fish I wanted at the weight I wanted, but yes, it was a recapture. But, you know, that aside, I was over the moon, really. I was over the moon to get some good footage. I got this lovely video footage of him.
Probably not like that, one more. She's a big girl. Good? Yeah, mate, it looks good. That'll do. That'll do. Yeah? Yeah. Fucking size. It's mad, isn't it? The lost all right.
And not only that, I've got some nice photos, because you know, the photos first time round weren't all that, to be honest, and these ones are great. And then we even got a little bit of video of him going back in the end as well. So that was it. That was the result of just a snap decision to go onto the island lake for you know, just that one spare week, and ended up with 3 fish and a new PB. So that's the way it goes, isn't it? Before I go, just sitting here looking where you are, right behind you is 4 little stacks of boxes. They're books. And I've started to get a few orders in this week, but it's obviously Christmas is coming, isn't it? I know it's only beginning of November, but it will soon be upon us. And what I've got there are fine nines and some Obsession with Carp. The remastered version that I did, the full colour one, they're not going to make Christmas. They're really not, there's not enough there to supply Christmas, and it's not being reprinted. So just to say, if you are somebody that watches my stuff and you are after someone getting you a Christmas present, you better tell them to get it now rather than leave it till the last minute, because they'll definitely be gone. So I've got a few fine lines. They're both on an offer. They are on my website, which is probably got a link in the comments at the bottom. If not, click the little link tree thing, and that gives you everything about everything on there. It'll be under my website, which is www.davelane.co.uk. So if you find that and click it, it'll take you straight to it. But there you go. So anyway, we've done one. We've caught up. And the next time I see you, it'll be probably from the banks of Yateley. So thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you all later. Ta-ra.